Hi guys, it's Dylan from Bijou Diamond Jewellery in London with another watch video, and today we're taking a look at the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Chronograph. So as with all my videos, let's go back in time now and take a look at the history of this watch. So we're going to go back to the late 60s, early 70s, and that's when quartz became really popular. Particularly Seiko introduced a watch that really brought a lot of attention to this new technology, really reliable watches, electronic of course, and it meant that people didn't need to wind their watches as well. They're extremely accurate, very reliable, and just far better in people's eyes than mechanical movements. And it was going in line with the movement of the times, you know, computers, space travel, etc., etc. It was the new craze, really, quartz movements. And because of this, the Swiss watch industry, the standard Swiss watch industry with mechanical movements really lost a lot of business, a lot of popularity, and people were looking kind of at these quartz movements because they were kind of a bit more futuristic. And Audemars Piguet was one of those brands that really was doing very poorly, and they knew they had to do something pretty special in order to bring their audience back and increase sales again. So they enlisted the help of a watch designer called Gerald Genta in the early 70s, and they said to him, you've got to create something totally new, totally unique and different that really means that people have to come to us, to Audemars Piguet and the Swiss watch industry, and start buying Swiss watches, really to differentiate between these quartz movements and actually what Swiss watchmaking is really about. So in 1972, they released the Royal Oak, which Gerald Genta had actually designed a year before that. And the Royal Oak was an incredible piece. It was kind of the first of its type completely. It was featured really high-end finishing, incredibly high-end finishing, much like a dress watch, but it was on a sports watch. And not just that, it was also in steel as well. So there was nothing like this sort of watch out there. Really, the thing that Audemars Piguet wanted was to create a watch really that could be perfect for any occasion and really be your only watch, you know, in your collection. And they did exactly that. They wanted to create the dressy vibes, the really high-end finishing that you get with a dress watch, and combine that with the more relaxed feeling of a bracelet steel sports watch, and combine the two to create the ultimate piece. The Royal Oak was not mega popular, but after around 1,000 of them were sold, it became really popular and people really understood what the piece was about. Really, what made them unpopular at first was how high in price they were. They were several times more expensive than equivalent sports watches from other brands like Rolex, for example. You know, massively more expensive, in fact, than those watches. And the reason being is because it was an incredibly difficult thing to do, to finish a watch to that level in steel. So the workmanship and the craftsmanship meant that Audemars Piguet couldn't produce these in the same volume that Rolex could, and also the skill and level of craftsmanship that goes into creating the Royal Oak, like the bracelet, the case, is far more specialist and takes a lot more time than a Rolex. So that's what people really understood, the difference there. Not only just the difference between these Royal Oaks that Audemars Piguet was producing, but also between equivalent sports watches like the Daytonas and the Submariners, really realizing that, wow, this Audemars Piguet Royal Oak is actually so much more special than those other watches. So after that, you know, after people really realized how incredible they really were, and how important they were as a milestone in watchmaking, that's when people really started to love the Royal Oak, and it became incredibly popular. It has always remained popular even to this day. It's an incredibly special watch, and many of them sell for over their list price. So the design itself was kind of inspired by a few different things, but one of the biggest inspirations Gerald Genta got was from a diving helmet and also a ship porthole, kind of a combination of the two. It had a nautical theme, and the name Royal Oak comes from the 8 naval ships, British naval ships, named the Royal Oak. So it has it's got very much a nautical theme about it. We've got those bolts around the bezel. It's an octagonal bezel as like a nod to those 8 ships. Those bolts and also the rubber gasket, the exposed rubber gasket around the bezel, is reminiscent of a diving helmet, and also in a way a ship porthole as well. So yeah, and of course it was a sports watch, so it was designed to be able to swim to a certain depth as well. It's not mega water resistant, but it's definitely more water resistant than, say, a dress watch. So we'll skip a few years now on to 1997. Between the 70s and 1997, the late 90s, most of the different variations of the Royal Oak that were created were much more towards the dressier end, the more complicated end, like perpetual calendars, moon phases, etc., etc. There was never really any sporty complications that Audemars Piguet put on the Royal Oak until 1997. That's when they released the 25860, which was a chronograph, and that was the first time that a chronograph, like I said, a sports complication featured on an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. The 25860 was a 39mm Royal Oak. It was a completely new design. It looked really, really cool, had slightly more depth than the 39mm standard Royal Oak, the time only or time and date Royal Oak. But yeah, incredibly popular watch at the time, a really, really cool size as well. Beautiful piece. A few years later on, they released the 26300 reference, also a 39mm Royal Oak chronograph, slightly changed bracelet and design on the case, and also a new set of dials as well. And then skip another few years on to 2012, which is when we saw the 40th anniversary of the Royal Oak. And that's when they completely revamped the Royal Oak line, upgrading the size of the watch from 39mm to 41mm across the whole range, almost the whole range. And the chronograph, the 26320, was released in 41mm case size, so a brand new bigger case size, completely redesigned bracelet, etc., etc., and a new movement. It was a really popular watch at the time and has remained pretty popular. But the one we're interested in was released in 2017, a couple of years ago, and that marked the 20th anniversary for the Royal Oak chronograph. And that's the model that we're looking at here today, which is the 26331 reference. The 26331 in 2017 SIHH featured brand new dials. They added some new designs with combinations of colors and bracelets and straps for the rose gold variations, but the steel line, pretty much the only thing they did was just change the dials. And the change in dials that they made was basically to add contrasting subdials and kind of these two-tone dials, whereas before all those Royal Oak chronographs featured a singular tone dial, like just a blue, a white, grey, black, etc., etc. Okay, so that concludes the history of this watch. Let's take a look at some of the features on this Audemars Piguet Royal Oak chronograph. So as always, let's start with our clasp. The clasp is the standard Royal Oak clasp. It's one of my favorite clasps in the industry. I always talk about this clasp. It's fantastic because it's incredibly solid. It's beautifully machined. And one of my favorite things about this clasp is that it folds away and it's completely flush with the feeling of the bracelet. So it doesn't break up the design of the bracelet at all. It doesn't protrude out from the bracelet. It's completely flush and just feels so, and looks really, really nice. It's also incredibly comfortable as well. It's a very comfortable clasp, much more so than the deployant clasp, the standard deployant clasp that they used to do on older models. It also is twin trigger, so it's incredibly solid and very secure on your wrist. Yeah, you can't really get much better than this clasp. Next, moving on to the bracelet. The bracelet on this watch is just incredible. All the Royal Oak bracelets are absolutely stunning. This is not my favorite variation. My favorite variation is actually the one that's on the extra thin, but this is just slightly more chunky. It's a really, really beautifully made bracelet. It is incredibly finished, just to the most magical level, and that's what made the Royal Oak at the time in the 1970s so unique and so popular, was how incredible the bracelet was. It really was like a piece of jewelry or a work of art. Every single link is flat, and that means that the light shimmers off this bracelet in a totally unique way, totally different to that of say an oyster bracelet from Rolex. The edges on the bracelet are also polished. Insides of the bracelet are also polished, and they've got these little mini plots and links between each bracelet link as well. The attention to detail on this bracelet is incredible, and one of my favorite things about this bracelet is not only is it very beautiful to look at, but it's also extremely comfortable because each link is quite small relative to other brands. It means that it conforms to your wrist really nicely. Moving up now onto the case. We have those two plots that connect the bracelet to the case, continuing that same design that we see all the way along the bracelet with those little plot links. And the case is similar in terms of its angular design to the bracelet. That same polished beveled edge on the side is continued up onto the case. A really beautiful little accent there. The case is super, super cool on this watch. This watch features a steel case back, unlike some of the time and date Royal Oaks and also some of the offshores. So that's one disappointment about this watch, I'd say, is I wish they put a clear crystal case back on this. That would have been amazing. Hopefully they'll do that when they next update the Royal Oak Chronograph. The case, as I said, beautifully designed, machined in steel, incredibly angular, and it features this beautiful balance between polished finish and brushed finish. The bezel has a really beautiful sharp edge, features a brushed finish on top, and then polish on the sides. We can see our exposed rubber gasket around the edge. The case, it pretty much is all in a brushed finish, just like I said, with some nice small subtle polished accents. Yeah, beautiful case, probably my favorite in the industry. In fact, Royal Oaks are one of my favorite watches ever. They're just truly beautiful things to look at, and the way the light dances off this watch is totally unique to the Royal Oak. There's no other watch really out there that can interact with light like this watch. Something I really like about this watch is the fact that we feature these pushers that are ready to go straight away. I really don't like it when watches like the Rolex Daytona have pushers that you have to unscrew. You don't have to do that on this watch. They're ready to go straight away as they are. Now moving on to our dial, which is our biggest difference between this one and the older references. This features a really nice panda dial. This is easily my favorite dial that they do on this newer style Royal Oak. Beautiful dial with these black and white, so black and white dial, black contrasting sub-dials, and we've got my favorite thing about this dial is the little edge around the edge of the dial. It's where the tachymeter usually would be on this watch, and yeah, really nice to tie in that detail. And one of my reasons why I prefer this over the others, why I really like this dial, I love the versatility that a white dial offers. The black helps to dress this watch up, the black accents on this watch, but also I prefer much smaller watches. In fact, I much prefer smaller watches than this 41mm. This 41mm wears more like a 42, 43mm because of those pushers on the side. But this watch featuring this dial and that outer black rim on this dial means that the watch appears slightly smaller. It helps to shrink that dial down slightly by a couple of millimeters. So it definitely feels like almost like a 39mm watch or a 40mm watch. Just coming back to the dial again, we've got our Petite Tapisserie dial with the amazing design. We've got our polished hands and polished accents like our indexes on the dial, really nice looking. We've also got a date function down at 4 o'clock. So on to whether or not I would own this watch. I would 100% own this Royal Oak. I would definitely own it with this white dial, this panda dial though, but probably I would prefer to own a 39mm watch. This one definitely suits my wrist really nicely, but if I was to choose kind of the ultimate variation, I'd choose the old 26300 reference with that panda dial. I think that's a really beautiful watch. It's one of my favorite Audemars Piguets they've ever made. So yeah, probably that's what I would choose if I was to look at a Royal Oak Chronograph. But this watch is a fantastic piece. It's easily one of the best dials that Audemars Piguet does. Very simple, very clean, extremely versatile, will go with almost any outfit because black and white are very neutral tones. I much prefer this to the older 26320 reference that from 2012. I think these contrasting sub-dials are a really cool, nice addition to the Royal Oak Chronograph. Thanks guys for watching. Let us know what you think of this watch in the comments. Let us know what other watches you'd like us to review. And as always, if you're interested in this watch or any other watch in the Swiss watch industry, don't hesitate to contact us. Our details are in the description, and also at the end of this video, we'd be happy to call this watch into stock for you or any other watch.